I suppose it's our main thing is we want athletes to feel fueled and to know exactly what that means and to understand their own experiences of feeling fueled and feeling confident in how to do it. But I suppose there's two parts to it, especially when working with female athletes. We provide the education, the knowledge around their energy needs, fuel and requirements, the impact that it has, and providing that then from maybe a numbers point of view, and then given the context around what that means through the foods that they eat and how they can actually create a plan that's going to allow them to reach those numbers, to allow them to fuel and recover as effectively as possible. But it's not always as simple as just delivering that information. There are a lot of conversations around the barriers and people just not feeling confident around implementing that. And this all comes from, I suppose, it's really complex and where those kind of attitudes come from. And we want to, I suppose, speak today around both the knowledge side of it, but also why is it a struggle for athletes to fuel, and how could we, I suppose, create a better conversation around fueling and make people help, I suppose, athletes and active people to feel confident in their fueling process. And
Gemma, there's a lot of females that come to us and they're really going at it with their training. They're training day to day, they're following their program, but they might not just be seeing the progress that they know that they're capable of. And the question marks lie not just on the training side, but their preparation and the fueling aspect of it. So why do some days feel better than others? Their energy levels are inconsistent, their recovery isn't at the place that they know it should be, their recovery is extended maybe an extra day or two, and they just feel like they're not fresh when they're getting maybe on the track, on the field, in the gym. So it's, like you said, it's not just the knowledge side of things, it's I suppose the psychological barriers that are there to be able to implement the knowledge that we obviously help with.
mm-hmm. Where would you say the barriers are coming from, or what are some of the reasons that females might not, I suppose, that message around carbohydrates might not land as effectively as it might with the likes of some of the male clients that we would have?
I think for females, there's so much stuff online, but they just have a fear of carbs massively. They just think, I eat carbs, I gain weight, and that's the be all and end all. The line is drawn there. I think for males, they enjoy eating, they enjoy big portions of food, but from a female perspective, there's always maybe like backhanded comments from maybe people that are not active or maybe don't have a good relationship with food. If they see females eating a pasta dish, they'd be like, are you going to eat all that? Or I could never eat that. And then that puts something in someone else's brain. Like if someone would kept saying that to you, like, maybe I'm actually doing the wrong thing here. You see it even with the types of food that females are even provided after sport. It can be totally different to what the men are having. And that shouldn't really be the case. But that's more, maybe it's coming from the top level or how the girls feel around different types of foods. But being able to try to not have to mirror what the men are doing, but being able for the athletes to feel okay with the food that they're having, that's what's really important. So it comes from all different angles. And I think even if you think about the stupid phrase, no carbs before marbs, and like stuff like that, it's like, okay, if I stop eating carbs, that will make me skinnier, that'll make me a better body composition. But for any athlete that's doing high intensity exercise, it's absolutely fundamental. And we know that when people begin to implement a higher carbohydrate diet, what their outputs are from the exercise side, it's night and day difference. How they feel during their training, their energy levels, their ability to recover. And even from a mood perspective, like if you're going out week in, week out, feeling tired, feeling drained, and you're actually stop enjoying your training versus if you're going out feeling like you've loads of energy, ability to perform, recovering well, like how good would you feel? So I think it's being able to facilitate the conversation on an individual level and a group level, but then I suppose supporting that psychological load of actually being able to do it.
Yeah, it's delivering the education side of it is so important because it is a shock to a lot of people. I suppose they underestimate their fueling demands as it is from the very start, and maybe even get them to feel comfortable in understanding the number of maybe a number that they're not used to seeing, or a number that they would nearly not associate with being healthy, because even that word itself can be controversial in a particular setting. But what you said around how complex it is when you've got messages coming from all over the place from the likes of coaches, from friends, and then you go back home and you're in a different setting with your family, and it's not around the sports and performance talk anymore. It might be around aunties and cousins and your sister and your mom talking about weight and shape, and all of these messages can nearly conflict each other. I suppose we've got this environment when you're working with us. So we've got a certain language that we speak around fueling and performance and body composition. That it is very, it's a very much a holistic view around it all, and it can be challenging when we're seeing an athlete maybe for a short period of time to really change that language, and it really highlights, I suppose, how long it can take unless you're immersed in a setting or an environment that even the way that we speak to each other is very much positive, and it's all about fuel, and it's all about how exciting that is to feel recovered and to feel fueled. And it can be challenging then when you're trying to deliver that message to a client on a once off, where they're going into their team, into their sporting environment, where that's just not the way that people speak, and it's nearly flippant comments or comments that feel like they're not oh, sure, they're no big deal, but they do actually have a lasting impact on someone, especially if it's about body composition that they feel is very personal. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and I suppose the fuel side of things that we're really trying to get across is more from an empowerment side of things, where you're trying to help people feel really confident in themselves first and foremost, because I suppose no amount of information is going to help if their relationship with food is fundamentally flawed. And so
Mm-hmm.
we all we have all the understanding on how to fuel active females, female athletes, but that's not usually where the problem lies. It's why is that message much harder to communicate or land in a female setting rather than, the likes of in a male setting, where it might be just a bit more about building relationships, delivering the information.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't just need to communicate the message, we actually have to think about how can we change how the message is communicated.
100%. And like, if you think about the message and like the carbohydrate targets for, just say, the same sport, males and females can be quite similar, but it's totally different how you need to actually facilitate that information. Think about going into a male setting, or even if it's in your own home. Like, males are, they're they're celebrated, they're commanded for the amount of food that they can eat and tuck away. But if that was, flip it around and put a female in that position, people just like, what are you doing? Why are you eating that much? And it's understanding the energy demands that females actually need for them from their sport, but physiologically for their hormones as well. I even know in my family, like, if you think about Christmas time, the lads would nearly would have an eating competition around Christmas dinner, but the girls would never really be a part of that. Now, I know males have a greater appetite and their larger bodies need more food, but it's just the way people perceive this. And even from a female athlete perspective, from a fueling and a refueling side, the males will always seem to have probably more food available to them. And why is it? We have to keep asking the question, is it the funding side, or is it that females actually are maybe feared consuming that amount of food after their exercise?
Yeah. And I think if you think of if we look at the content that we're providing around the fuel side of things, and even in the course that we're building now, and what we're going to deliver, it's not that the information itself has to change too much. We can see that through the literature, through the research, that a lot of things that are coming out now, we have obviously got a huge way to go, a long way to go before we can say that with huge certainty of the requirements for women. But what's coming out is that generally nothing needs to change too much from a carbohydrate point of view, from a fueling point of view, or even the likes of protein requirements. They're generally the same, but what does need to change is how we're delivering that information, because we have to recognize the differences, especially in the potential emotional attachments to foods, to body composition, the societal pressures, the links to appearances, and pressures from all angles, guilt and shame that is often around food within females. And like you said, the different conversations that you would be having at home with the lads versus the girls, they are fundamentally different. So we are just, I suppose, our aim is to change that message and to help females feel like they can confidently fuel as effectively as possible, and actually feel like they themselves can benefit from it, because I suppose it's only going to be from the evidence
Mm-hmm.
themselves where they actually feel like, yeah, this this makes sense now.
And it's even from, it kind of comes through down from a coaching side and understanding, like, it is a touchy subject to touch on body composition from a male versus a female. Even doing, if you're doing like DEXA scans or skin folds with a male team, they can kind of take it on their chest, like, right, I know what I need to work on. They can have a little bit of a laugh and a joke with each other. Geez, you're X percentage, say, kind of laughing with each other. Versus in a female environment, it's very different, has to be approached very differently. There has to be a lot of education beside it, and support mentally and physically around that topic. But also then from a coaching side, talking about females' body composition, if someone goes like, oh, you look ripped, you look like you're in great shape, but they're not fueling well and they're actually really under recovering. But now they're told, okay, I have a really good body composition, I need to stay that if I want to be able to perform. But maybe they're not performing, and they're a fear of, okay, my body composition changes and maybe I'm not getting those comments, would I be respected as much as an athlete? So there's so many different sides, so you have to be careful, and it's not straightforward.
No, not at all. And I think that's such a good point, because it is, there's people in your environment that you respect that also make the decisions around playing. Well, you know, if it's a team sport, but there's even, think of any coaches, they're the people that you look up to, and the you know, that you respect their opinions, and their comments hold a heavy weight in comparison to maybe someone else in your life. But as it relates to sports, certainly they're the comments that hold strong. And if those little comments and if those remarks are, they can be taken in the wrong way sometimes, and if they're from an uneducated point of view, especially in the realms of body composition in female setting, then it can be challenging around what the ideal is, and it can make it hard for, I suppose, a female who, like you said, maybe actually isn't looking at performance metrics and they're solely focusing on appearance as their guide towards performance. Then they can kind of get lost in some of the practices that they're doing, and it's actually not leading them to improve, progress, and actually, as a byproduct, further down the line, could be leading them towards injury, missing games, illnesses. And it's a really hard conversation to have then, when that has been the whole metric for success, and you know, potentially a long time in their career, and can make it really hard to actually change those practices.
And even then you look at maybe some of the uniforms or whatever the female athletes have to wear. So think about athletics, you could think about swimming, you could think about other, even if it was in CrossFit, like you're potentially wearing very minimal. And if you're known for having this specific physique and that's maybe your identity now, but you know that you're not fueling, and maybe we're approaching the topic of where you need to eat more carbohydrates, you need to eat more food, and the fear is, will my body change? And for a lot of the times, actually, their body composition improves because now they're able to train harder, recover quicker, and they're gaining more muscle because now they're adapting to the exercise. But it's that gap in between of the fear of doing it versus doing it and seeing the outcome. So we're trying to push people towards that. And once they begin to see that output of, okay, I'm actually able to, I maybe hit a PB, my body composition hasn't changed, I may be actually in a better shape when I'm more fueled. That's the golden stuff.
What would you say to get to that point? And even if you look at, I suppose we've had loads of conversations, but even about around people that you know, people that you've worked with, that they have that aha moment where they're like, okay, that makes sense. I actually know why you're pushing me to do this. What would you say is that initial buy-in or trust that people kind of have to go through to then get to that point where it does make sense, or it usually clicks with them?
Different athletes, different ways, but I think for a lot of them is they're seeking out something that they can't tap into. And if they're kind of at the edge of like, I've tried everything, I not on a giving up, but like, I need to do something to help myself here. But it's also the trust that you build with the athlete as well, and the relationship that you have. I think you can't go from naught to 100. There has to be that journey that you're bringing them on, and for them to be able to build up the evidence that, okay, things aren't changing too drastically here, even from a body composition side, but I am seeing some changes in my performance outputs.
Mhm.
So it's building the trust, building the relationship. But again, it's challenging the athlete as well. It's like, well, why have you come to me?
Mm.
Well, what are you willing to change? And if they're saying nothing, it's like, well, then I actually can't help you here. So it's being able to give them the education. This is the journey that we're going to go on. If you don't feel comfortable with it, we can always take a step back. And
Mhm.
that's it. It doesn't have to be 100% and 0%. It's beginning to turn up the dial, then beginning to see the outputs of it, and then you can begin to facilitate them on that journey.
Yeah. And it's often the hardest message to communicate at the start, because their expectations are never, from the very start, are never the same as what they leave with. It's
Mm-hmm.
always this new perspective, and I suppose we can't. It's something, I suppose, I don't know. Is it possible to nearly show someone and allow them to feel like they know exactly what they're walking into? Because so
Mm-hmm.
often they discover a completely new way of how they approach their food behaviors, their training behaviors, and then it's some of the feedback then is absolutely incredible to read, because they've nearly discovered it and implemented the things themselves, and that's where the real value is.